Okay, so it's 2 o'clock now. Let's get started. Thank you for joining us today. So we're thrilled to welcome you to Responsible Disruption and our 6th Innovation Table Zoomcast. My name is James Gamage and I'm the Director of Innovation and the Social Impact Lab at the United Way of Calgary and area.
And my name is Monique Blau and I'm the Director of Strategy and Design in the lab and at J5, a Calgary-based innovation and design firm. And we're the hosts of Responsible Disruption. We are excited to welcome our guests as we explore Philanthropy 2.0 and how philanthropy is changing and what it means during these turbulent times. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are currently gathered on the land adjacent to where the Bow River meets the Elbow River. The traditional Blackfoot name of this place is Maquintis, which we now call the city of Calgary. This is traditional land of the Blackfoot Confederacy, as well as Treaty 7 territory, which includes Kainai, Siksika, Piikani, Tsuut'ina, and the Stoney Nakoda nations. We would also like to recognize the Métis people and the Inuit people who have made their home here in Calgary. Before we begin, we have a few housekeeping items to cover and our agenda. So we are recording the session today, as we do every week, and you'll be able to share this with your colleagues and friends as we'll be sending you an email link. It'll also be available on our YouTube channel. Our next Responsible Disruption Innovation Table episode is next Wednesday on May 20th at 2 p.m. And we'll be exploring adaptation and adoption, which will be a discussion with innovators and what we can learn about adaptations being made during this crisis and how we're going to apply them in the future. Our agenda today, we have a few introductions. We'll move through a table conversation, which for those of you who have joined us before will be familiar with, and we'll also be having audience questions. If you'd like to ask a question along the way, please ensure that you click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom panel. We'll be collecting them throughout our session and we'll answer as many as we can today. James?
I'll try and unmute myself. So our social systems are being disrupted and there is demand for new ideas, solutions, products and services. This demand for support continues to outpace the supply of funding and services. So we in the Social Impact Lab, which is a partnership between J5 and the United Way of Calgary and area, are responding to this disruption by investing in innovation, which we are calling responsible disruption, ensuring that any change that results is considered and fair to Calgarians and communities. Our Responsible Disruption Zoomcasts are a series of discussions with leading players in the social innovation sector and beyond. Discussions about communities, systems, and the role of the individual in change. If you're in the social sector, you'll be more than aware that philanthropy is changing. The expectations of young leaders are different, and the old donor model does not fit with their needs, desires, and aspirations. Today, we're speaking to 3 young leaders about this. What are the expectations of young leaders about their involvement in the social sector? How their own organizations operate to meet these expectations? And how can the social sector adjust its model to engage young leaders better?
Wonderful. So let's take a few moments to welcome our guests. First, I'd love to introduce you to Jess Janzen. Jessica is a motivational speaker. She's a published author and a serialpreneur. Jess and her husband, known as Hot Ronnie, are founders of the Love for Lewiston Foundation. After losing their son, Lewiston, almost 3 years ago, Jess decided that she would stop wasting time and start moving on her big dreams, speaking, writing, and inspiring others to do the same. Her clothing line, the Lewiston label, highlights the life lessons Lewiston taught her. And the foundation is impacting lives across Canada and supporting critical research and medical needs for families that are fighting spinal muscular atrophy. In just 3 short years, the foundation has raised over $700,000, and this year they will hit that $1 million mark. Jess loves spending time with her family, soaking up the sunshine and being by the water, and dreaming really big, always with a daily focus on running towards the roar. I love that. Welcome, Jess. Our next guest for today is Ashley Anderson. And Ashley is a member of the board for United Way of Calgary and area and the Director of Sales of Enablement for Shaw Business. Formerly the chair for for Gen Next Committee and an alumnus of the University of Calgary, Ashley has worked across various industries to help drive revenue while helping teams effectively build the skills required to do so at scale. In both her professional and personal life, Ashley works to bring out the best in others while helping to build strong bridges within community. She's from Saskatchewan. She's a mother of 2 spirited young boys, a lover of athletics, and definitely looking for competition of any kind. So well fitted that you're here with us today. And finally, I'd like to introduce Jason Ribeiro. Jason is a corporate leader, a community advocate, and one of Canada's most awarded social science grads. He serves as Director of Strategy at Calgary Economic Development and is responsible for overseeing the execution of our city's economic vision, Calgary in the New Economy. He is a PhD candidate at the University of Calgary, researching leadership and innovation and cross-sector partnership. And he is a serial volunteer and a board member, recently nominated as the best civic activist in this year's Best of Calgary Awards for his work as curator of Global Shapers Calgary. Welcome and thank you to all 3 of you for joining us today. And just a reminder, before we hand it over to James, please ensure that our audience uses the Q&A button so that we can have your voice as well.
Okay, so we've heard a lot about young leaders changing the workforce, but I wanted to focus on a few stats that I found just to kick this conversation off and help frame it in the context of philanthropy. So first off, the millennial generation is now the most powerful voice in the workforce. So 50% of the workforce is now millennial generation. Young leaders are generous. The Case Foundation's Millennial Impact Report in 2014 estimated that 84% of millennials gave to charity. And millennials, or young leaders as we're calling them for this conversation, are more financially influential in the near future, in that $30 trillion of wealth transfer is due to come across generations in the near future, coming to the millennial generation. So I think the conclusion there is that the social sector needs to take notice. You know, this is an increasingly powerful group and one that we want to explore in this conversation. So I'm going to start with Ashley, a question to you, if I may. So you're former chair of the Gen Next group at the United Way. Can you tell us a little bit about that group and how people get involved, and a bit about the characteristics of the young leaders that join that group, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, James. And hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. I think the Gen Next group is something that's evolved over the last 12 years within United Way, but there's certainly an understanding that we have a responsibility to ensure that we're really building up the philanthropists and community investors of the future. And this group was pulled together, as I understand it, originally to really activate that, but through real conversations. United Way, as most of you are well aware, is a very, very large legacy organization. It's been around for a really long time and is often misunderstood. And I think the Gen Next group was really pulled together to be able to create open, disarming conversations about what the future of philanthropy and investment was really all about. It is a really incredible group of individuals. I've had an opportunity, obviously, to both sit within the committee and to really watch it evolve, even in the time since I've been there. And it's consistently strong, community active leaders, lots of people from within the corporate landscape who've expressed a lot of interest in terms of really giving back. I think folks who have gone through that, first very beginning startup moment of their career and are seeing now the ability to perhaps have a bit more of that financial capability to invest, or, maybe if not that talent or that time that they can really pull in. And so this was meant to be a way to really get the voices to the table, and some spectacularly talented folks over there. Rob Hart, of course, right now is the chair of Gen Next, and really leading them in a super fresh direction.
Good, thank you very much. So Jason, turning to you. So the Global Shapers Network, you're obviously your focus is the Calgary hub, but when you think about the Global Shapers worldwide, can you tell us a little bit about that organization and the young leaders that will join Global Shapers?
Yeah, thanks for the question, and thanks to everyone attending today. Shameless plug right over here. I think the most important thing to note about the Global Shapers community is quite similar to Ashley's comment. You have a legacy organization like the World Economic Forum, which is this big behemoth of a group that really seeks to merge, public policy officials and government with leading business minds. And the impression is always this sort of elite Davos gathering that happens every year, even though they're working on these really, really, unignorable challenges that are happening all across the world. And the Global Shapers community was founded because they came to the realization that all of these large aspirational things we want to do in terms of poverty, the future of work, climate action, all of them have young people at the center. And that picks up on some of the stats, James, that you referenced. And so the idea that they weren't at those tables, not just in Davos and Geneva, but in their own communities, could they be empowered to work on these huge monumental challenges? I think was seen as a huge weakness within the current approach. So the Global Shapers community was then founded and has grown from these independent group of local hubs, particularly in Canada. The hubs, I think specific in Alberta, are just reaching a level of maturity, but the international world, you've seen hubs take off. I think even Don Iveson, the mayor of Edmonton, was the founding curator of the Edmonton hub, and I lead the Calgary equivalent. So the whole goal is to drive dialogue, action, and change. And so in terms of Philanthropy 2.0, all of that through the World Economic Forum and Global Shapers is seen through the lens of technology, not as a neutral agent, but as something that's going to ebb and flow as we deal with the future of work, child poverty, mental health, gender equity, and including how we deal with climate action. So local hubs at scale working across continents around the world. And I think the current tally is about 450 hubs all across the planet with over 15,000 members. And it's attracted, I think, in many ways the best and brightest, but our focus in Calgary is not just on the best and brightest in terms of the sort of corporate community in downtown Calgary, but we've made a very concerted effort to attract teachers, frontline workers, and those that really have a passion about those issues and need a vehicle to be able to channel those passions. So we're quite proud of how our community in Calgary has grown over the past year.
Great. So a pretty diverse group then. That's fantastic. And Jess, if I can just ask you now, tell us a little bit about Love for Lewiston and how you describe your donors or the group of collaborators that work on that.
Oh my gosh, that's such a loaded question. Thank you again for having me here. Honored to be here and represent our organization and what we're doing. You know what? I'll tell you who my favorite donors are. They are like these 5, 6, 7-year-old kids that are showing up. And for them, it is like a lemonade stand or their birthday party. And their mom sends me an Instagram message and says, my little son, Charlie, he didn't want anything for his birthday. He wanted to help Lewiston. We showed him a picture. And they show up at my house with like a hand and an envelope full of change. And it's like $22, $77. And those are like, I love the donors that are like, here's a check for $10,000. I love them all, whatever the amount. But it really, it's dollar by dollar, cent by cent. And so we literally have every type of donor that you can dream of and every type of volunteer, but it's a wide range. It is literally the kid that's mom has been watching us and the story unfold on Instagram to, we have really wealthy friends that have, a big arm of what they do or of their family wealth is directed at it. We got a really large check at the end of the year. And I had no idea who the guy was. And I was like, who the heck is this guy? Because normally it comes from a connection or something. And it was his daughter. They sit down as a family and they, divvy up to their charities at the end of the year. And he started involving his children in this giving back scenario. And so they do it as a family. And she said, oh, I went to high school with a girl. And that girl was my sister-in-law, and she happened to follow and know the story. And so I called this guy and I just started bawling on the phone to him because I'm like, you have no idea who we are. But he's like, no, your organization has touched my daughter's heart. And so we are literally seeing donors from the 5-year-old kid who's doing a lemonade stand or donating birthday funds to someone who's in their late 70s. And at the end of the year is, allocating funds, how they like to distribute to get their charity receipts and, you know, do their give back. And so we see it all. And especially in the middle-aged group, you know, we see people that are like, hey, here's what I can give, or here's how I can get involved. So we see it all. And I guess I should say the Love for Lewiston Foundation was founded out of a pain that we experienced as a family. We use pain as rocket fuel. And so my son got diagnosed with a terminal illness just after he was born in, it was August of 2016. And the doctor said they wouldn't give him more than a year. I was like, no, you're a neurologist. You can't be that smart, thinking that we would beat the odds. And unfortunately, they were very accurate. And at the time, there was no cure and no treatment. And so our son, the disease progressed really quickly, and we lost our son in 2016. And literally we started this foundation, not like I've ever dreamed of starting a charity or a nonprofit, out of not wanting to have a pity party on his birthday party. And so we put out a call to our friends and said, hey, we're not going to sit at home. We're going to auction off my husband, Hot Ronnie, in a Speedo and have cake and dance the night away. And we raised $42,000. And I was like, hot dang, if we can do that in one night, we can raise a lot of money. So our goal is to hit our $1 million mark this year.
That's cool. That's a very touching story. So just thinking about that, you know, it's obviously a very compelling story. Do you get donors becoming sort of contributors in another way to the Love for Lewiston campaign? Do they help you organize events, or do they get sort of drawn in by the cause?
One of our most epic donors was a family here in the city. You know, they're very involved in the business community. And when our son got diagnosed in August of 2016, a check showed up at my front door for $5,000. I was like, what? Didn't know the family. I had never met them. And they were like, we can't take your pain away, but we know that you have a long journey ahead of you. And so, you know, there's these donors that have just followed the story, and, you know, the ups and the downs, the mountaintop moments and the valleys, and seen us advocate for treatment and continue to push for more research. So the landscape has shifted. And so we've really seen it all, but these donors have come alongside us. And we've also lost some donors where, you know, it isn't a fit this year, or, you know, they're switching directions as a company. I think it's ever evolving and never the same things. But we've been so fortunate that when we've shared our message, our foundation is really personal. You know, it's our family story, and we've just decided to use the platform that we've been gifted to do good work. And ironically, a lot of people don't know this about myself. I just kind of refresh people's memory, and I covered in my book. But when I moved to Calgary in about a year later in 2007, I met a family. And I had literally said, I'd never want to work with handicapped kids. They disgust me. I don't know why I said that. I had never worked with handicapped kids. I'd never gone to school for it. I was in between jobs. And a week later, I met a family with 2 handicapped kids, and I started showing up to help this family. And so I have been helping and involved in the world of spinal muscular atrophy, the disease my son passed away from. And you can call it a joke, irony. There's other choice words that I won't use on here for whoever knows. You can fill in the blanks. It's nuts. And so I literally got a memo handed down from the heavens above that said, this is the work that you're meant to do. And so prior to my son getting the diagnosis, we had just finished fundraising money. And so I've been immersed in this world for now over 14 years, and know that it's our life's work to find a cure.
Cool, thank you, thank you. So I'm just going to prompt the audience for questions. So we want this to be a really interactive session. So please put your questions in the question box. We'll endeavour to answer them with the panel. So we're interested in this being as interactive as possible. So please ask away. So I'm going to ask another question of you, Jess, actually. So
Here I am.
We've heard about your target market, and you know, you mentioned about the Hot Ronnie events and the like. Can you sort of talk to us about the full range of activities and events that you run with the foundation?
For sure. So, I mean, Ashley's probably been an amazing supporter, and I think have been at every single one of her events. She's always lurking in the crowd, and I see her, and she's always there supporting and repping and spreading the good word. So we typically do 3 big events, and those are, I mean, obviously we're pivoting and shifting right now, and I want to bang my head against a brick wall, because what we do is with people, because our events have this feel this warmth, and it makes you feel like you're a part of something. And so the very first thing was our son's birthday. And so I don't want to sit at home and have a pity party. So we literally said, let's just host this party. We'll do silent auction. You know, we'll do this live auction. We got local businesses and said, hey, can you just donate like yourself as a human being and like create an experience with people around you? And out of that, I was like, oh my gosh, how awesome would it be if I put my husband in a Speedo? Last year we did neon leopard print. He goes on a juice cleanse. He gets the spray tan, like he's like all in it. And then we stick him up there with some of our other friends. His brother's a hockey player, looks amazing in a Speedo. And we just have some fun, and they auction them off. To be honest, they never go for the highest bid. He always thinks that they're going to. There's always some other like trip to Hawaii that goes for the highest amount, but it just gets people laughing, and it creates that fun kind of camaraderie, and people look forward to it. And then, you know, we close up the night. We always sing happy birthday to our son, and we always do confetti cannons. And any venue, I'm always like, there will be confetti here for the next 5 years. And it's just like this massive celebration, and it brings so much warmth. And then the other two that we do are golf tournament, which is pretty typical. My husband loves golf and pictured and dreamed of golfing with their son. And so he wanted to do that event in a way to honor and be able to spend that time. And we've had such a blast doing that. It's usually a bunch of dudes. We always have a team of 4 girls that enter, but it's usually a bunch of dudes. And we always bring someone from the SMA community who's here in Calgary. And we've had a girl from Toronto share her message. And there's never a dry eye in the house, because they just share about their lives and their challenges and their struggles, and their body is robbed of movement. And so that's why we wanted to create an event based around movement. And so we've hosted with other studios here in the city. And most recently, we have a really great partnership with YYC Cycle. And we host an event on the rooftop of the Marriott with Michael Bernard's Fitzgerald and the Marriott Hotel. And we have 130 bikes. We crank the music so loud that you can hear, you know, miles away. And we rock out on the top of a roof. And so we just try to have fun and create experiences for people that they'll remember. And our goal is always that we want to inspire people to use what they have, which is, you know, you have breath in your lungs and a beating heart. And we always pray that when people walk away from our events, they're like, oh, okay, if they can do that in the midst of pain and heartache, I can use what I have to do whatever that is. And if that's to go to your corporate 9 to 5 and show up and be your best damn self, or if that's to start your own charity or start your YouTube channel or whatever it is that you have dreaming of, we just want to give people the encouragement that anything's possible.
Good, thank you. And Ashley, perhaps I should ask you, as an attendee at some of those events.
Yeah, she can speak to it.
I'm happy to describe in detail the auctioning of the men at the event, because it is legitimately a sight to see. I know that Jess has some really cool. So, I mean, quickly, 2 things. Number one, if you're not already following Jessica on the Instagram, do it, because it's the easiest way to get information. And it's also a really awesome way to see something that I think from our landscape, and Jason, I would argue you'd likely agree, as we're seeing the landscape of donation habits and investment habits, all of those components, I think one of the things that really does shine through is the never-ending consistent theme is our generation, and I would argue all generations, have really continued to strive for a tighter line of sight. They really want to feel connected to where they're showing up. And when you walk into Lewiston's birthday party, or you go to, the Ride the Roof events, like it is a really, really good blend of, it's Instagrammable, which we know matters to our segment. It matters that you can take a selfie and do a pan view. You're a part of something. FOMO is something that we can't argue with, is a contributing factor in community investment choices in our generation. Love it or not, it's just the fact. Lewiston's birthday is another really great example. It's fun. You're with people that you see within the community. Jess and I became friends because I was watching the Lewiston events go down, and we've become quite close as a result of that, just having access. And so I think the events themselves are a blast. I know, Jess, you've got some really cool pivots you guys are planning, just given that that end of May birth date is coming quickly. But there's just such great and exciting endeavors that are happening, I think, to pivot and just staying tied in. But Jess knows how to throw a party and to do it for a good cause and have an excuse to go. And those confetti cannons are seriously next level. So it's James, you are muted, but I know you're asking about the Speedos. So there's usually a cheetah.
So anyway, I was going to have a question about the Gen Next group actually. So how do you engage the Gen Next group in the in the community? What motivates them to get involved? And it's not going to be speedos, I guess.
Well, I'm actually, truth be told, joking aside, speedos doesn't hurt. It does help. No, I think it's a good question, and frankly, we don't. There's no silver bullet answer. I think it's really just paying attention to. Part of it is what mobilizes us. I think the nice thing with Gen Next, and Jason, I know your group as well. I think of Rotary Calgary, other good examples like that. When you're engaged, you're looking to yourself as your key prospect. And so for me, specifically, when I'm looking at those investments that I'm choosing to make in the community and my family chooses to make in the community, it correlates back to what I see. I'm going to rally behind Jess all day long because I know Jess, I love Jess. I get to participate in the events. I see the line of sight. It matters that you've got a view, and we're certainly seeing this in the behaviors. We mentioned offline as we were prepping, of course, for the call. One of the behaviors that we're really seeing is, especially for our segment generationally, is we really want to go all in on the components of the community that matter most to us. So when we talk about the youth segment, setting kids up for success, whether that's through literacy programs, food insecurity challenges that we're seeing within the city, only further exacerbated through COVID. Really being able to go all in and having an understanding and a line of sight, I would argue, as United Way, this is something we've really had to aggressively combat, whether that's through rebranding, really tearing down, busting the myths that often surround the work that United Way does. Candidly, walking in, I didn't know a lot about United Way when I first came in, or Gen Next when I first engaged with the group. Gen Next, of course, running alongside with United Way. What I learned is that as a generation, we're looking to make the best impact with our dollars, especially in a situation where we haven't gone into our wealth collecting years necessarily. There is the goals and objectives of the amount that we want to be investing back into the community in our ideal state. A lot of us committing to a percentage of our wage, for example. And in that, it's really, really important to us that we're able to invest it in a way that we can trust that it's going to the right place. And I know that's something that we've really had to unpack as United Way, because there's lots of misnomers around how dollars are invested in the community. And as well, we really want to look for root cause solutions. And that to me is the thing that I love the absolute most about United Way as an organization, is it's all about not how do we take care of the folks that are in a challenging circumstance, although there are, of course, partner agencies that we support that do that, but specifically rallying on the upstream challenges. How do we alleviate the upstream issues so that the downstream issues either shift and evolve or become less? Eradication of poverty obviously being one of the big goals attributed back to United Way fairly loudly. And the Gen Next group really seems to rally around that. And I see that even just in my own specific community investment behaviors as well.
Yeah. I'd love to add to that. Ashley, I think a lot of like that generation that we're talking about, they want to be part of something. Mm-hmm. Like they're not just sitting back and writing a donation. They want to tangibly feel that. And I think we've seen successful partnerships, and you look at some really cool companies here in Calgary that are like, hey, how can we rally? Because people want to feel like they're associated with that, and that especially that generation. I would say, it is dollar by dollar, cent by cent, and that generation, kind of that gap is specifically, they're the ones that buy the early bird tickets, but they're sharing on social media to say, hey, look at what I'm a part of, look at what I'm going to, here's how I'm getting involved. Or they're purchasing, like we have an apparel line, portion of proceeds go towards that. You look at local laundry, 10%. That's where things are blowing up because it's a tangible. It's not this massive check where it's like, hey, we're asking you to donate $5,000 as a sponsor. And they can get involved and be a part of something. And those two small things change it. And if you can get around that as an organization, you're already moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it's funny, Jess, I know that the Love for Lewiston Foundation has seen really great success in Ride the Roof, which is, of course, the spin opportunity. Yeah. We've seen a much smaller scale version, but really seen the Gen Next group rally on sweat-oriented endeavors. Of course, many of you have seen United Way right now is doing, their sweat marathon. We want to be active. I love the way you articulated that, Jess, like really feeling like you're a part of it. You can see it, you can touch it, you can feel it. The experiential component is so real. And Jason, I know I've heard you speak to that as well, and a lot of your social media activity to the experiential component, the involvement component.
Yeah, that's cool. Actually, pulling on that thread, actually, Jason, I was thinking about the Global Shapers Network, and obviously you're curator of the Calgary hub, but it's a global organization. How do you pull on that sort of that need to be part of something from a global versus a local issues point of view? What do your members want to be involved in? Are they the huge global issues, or are they more interested in things that they can see here in Calgary?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, and I think what we've realized is they're inextricably linked, and I think that was the reason that the community was founded to begin with, right? If you want to be able to deal with these big, huge, vexing challenges, ultimately, no matter how what report you're looking at or the macro view that you may have from the World Economic Forum's perspective, this is impacting people in their communities. This is impacting people in their homes. This is impacting people in their workplaces. If you don't have an operational arm that's able to do the work on the ground, you're not going to be able to make as many inroads. And I think that's why the community has grown globally so exponentially. And so what we're seeing is that every hub in every state or province or jurisdiction and even country is a little different. And they're set up to meet the needs of their local communities, but their unique value proposition is they understand where that local work is linked to these big global challenges. And so ultimately, when we see these big multilateral efforts to climate change or to reducing gender inequality or poverty, ultimately it's positions of authority that are sitting around a table at the UN negotiating these agreements. It's hard to find your place in that, but it isn't hard to find your place in contributing to local recycling efforts or local climate advocacy. And so what we've done this year and within our executive is really look at the Calgary landscape. Our members really understand what is challenging for Calgary in the current time frame, but also in the future, and also understand what work they're personally involved in aside from Shapers. So looking at the talent that we have, looking at the talent we could potentially recruit, and seeing these challenges coming our way, whether it being climate action through potential flooding that could happen in our community at any moment, whether it be the future of work in a COVID context. That's not only a focus for the World Economic Forum, they're the ones that coined the phrase the fourth industrial revolution, but certainly now it's exposed in a city that's overbuilt in terms of office space. What does the future of work look like? And given the fact that we have a lot of talented management consultants, professionals, and otherwise, they're going to be subject matter experts in framing out what that looks like. So I definitely see the connection to the global, but the on-the-ground work in the local being of equal value. And I don't think ultimately our ability to meet our goals in advocating, raising dollars, conducting programming in these core four areas for us, which are future cities, healthy cities, civic life, and let's go down this. Future cities, civic life, healthy cities, and climate action. The ability to meet all of those is going to inextricably be linked to all connections.
And it sparks the question also. I mean, some of those are like really big issues and very, some would say sometimes could be treated from an activism point of view. Where's the boundary between campaigning and making change and activism in Global Shapers? Or is that something that your members are interested in?
Yeah, I think again, the lines are becoming blurred. I know one of the questions in the comment box is how is the nature of philanthropy changing? I think the line between advocacy and activism is also becoming blurred, right? We live in a world that's powered by technology and the personalization of that technology to be able to have a digital profile and kind of force conversations. And I think, even for Ashley's group with Gen Next, that's always a balance between your professional life and the work that you do in Shapers. And so I think it's been a boundary that we've tested. And certainly I think we've never as an organization pushed any of our members to put themselves in a position where they're going to be bleeding into an activism realm in which they may be uncomfortable. But we've left it open enough so that everyone can find their place. And what we've seen time and time again is it's the issue that has generated our momentum, our activity. So if it is something to do with an inherent inequality that's happening in Calgary, you see people not even, sort of questioning and saying, wait, is this right? No, we need to do this. And we have such a great relationship with our members, and actually a really fantastic global network to tap into, to be able to pick up the phone and talk to someone in Seattle and say, hey, I understand you did this campaign last year. How did that go? What were the potential lessons that you learned? That's where we've been very, very effective in our advocacy / activism, in being able to tap into the network, learn the lessons, and then take the risk. And I think ultimately, again, our ability to deliver for those who depend on us to speak to issues, and those who rely on us to be able to deliver services, be it contributions to food security, raising money for personal protective equipment as we're doing in COVID-19. Ultimately, we want the lines to be blurred so we can have maximum effectiveness in dealing with those issues.
Cool. We ought to go to the questions. A number have come up. Monique, do you want to go through some of those?
Yeah, there's some really great questions here. And in fact, they work really well as we think about, the opportunity to try and create space for individuals that want to volunteer, the idea of FOMO, the idea of line of sight. But even before you get to all that, there's always this big hurdle. And the question is, and I'll raise it for you, Jessica, it's what was the biggest hurdle that you had to overcome when you started fundraising? And how did you attract donors to your organization?
Unmuted. Okay. I think a great question. I mean, there's hurdles everywhere. And even now we are trying to jump through a new set of hurdles with COVID-19 and what that looks like. But truthfully, I think the biggest hurdle for anyone is just getting started. So it's like listening to the voices of fear and doubt. And so we get so paralyzed in overthinking that it has to be perfect that we don't do anything. And like I've heard the thing 80% is the new 100%. Because we're like, oh, we can't launch it. The website's not perfect. Or, oh, like this arm of the thing isn't working. And so, because that, then we shouldn't do this. And so I think for someone like myself, like I've always given to charities and been involved and volunteered my time. And like I said, this was never like on my bucket list of like, I'm going to have a charity one day and we're going to save the world and find the cure for SMA. I was just like, F it. I'm like, let's just go do this because this disease needs more exposure. There are families, my family, I could never bring my son home because there was no funding for it. So I saw a problem and I was like, there's no solution currently right now. So I'm going to be the solution. And so I think when we go into fundraising, we just second guess ourselves and everyone just sees this number right now. They see 700,000, but what they don't remember is that the very first fundraiser I did when I knew this family and I was pregnant with my son at the time who I didn't know had this disease, the first fundraiser I hosted, 13 people showed up, 13. There was more empty bikes in the room when we talked about movement. There was more empty bikes in the room than there was, people part of it. And I left that. I called my mom and I bawled my face off. I was like, I'm a failure. We're never going to get to our goals. I'm like, we only raised $640 and 40 of that was from some random guy on the street that I think felt bad for me because I was like trying to not cry on the way to my car. And so I think we like fundraising, like you just have to show up. And I'm preaching this to myself, but it's like show up, do the hard work, and then stay consistent. And so we had a great plan for this year. It's gone to hell in a handbasket and some other choice words I'd love to use. And I'm having to pivot and shift. And I literally have been battling like, I just won't do it this year because like, who knows, it's not going to be successful. And I've told myself, if I can't raise $250,000 in one night, then why are we even going to plan and do it? So don't be paralyzed by fear. Don't be paralyzed by the doubt. Do the hard work, show up. And if it doesn't go as planned, you got to keep going.
That's great. Thank you. I am curious, when we talk about Love for Lewiston, but we also look at, the United Way as an example, or even what we're doing with Global Shapers. Jess, when you're planning out what you're going to do, how do you think about all those target audiences that you're trying to attract? And I think that plays for both of our other guests as well. I appreciate jump in, but do you need some kind of a plan? Do you have to talk to them differently depending on who you're trying to raise awareness with and get dollars from ultimately, or time?
I'll answer, and then I think Ashley and Jason probably need to close this one out. I believe that we've been successful because I've just dreamed out loud, and I do not sit back and strategically map out on my whiteboard and say, how do we speak to the donors in the 15 to 25 category, and what's our execution strategy for the older donors? I'm like, who do we know that's rich? Next, okay, who are we targeting on social media? So I wish I could say I was that strategic, but I would be lying. Yeah. Literally, I think people just get so fired up by my passion that somewhere along the way, we have been blessed by the grace of God that the right people fall into place. Like I had a donor, literally December 29th, we're writing a check for $10,000. I just wanted to confirm who it was addressed to. So I wish I could say I'm very strategic and we do this. We just show up, and I think the biggest battle is showing up. And one day we're going to have to get way more strategic, but we're in like this insane growth stage, 0 to $1 million, you can call it. I think we get to $1 million and we're going to have to get more strategic. And so in this phase, we've literally thrown anything at the wall. What sticks, we do. That's the honest truth.
Great. Ashley, Jason, would you like to add anything to that? I'm sure there are some people in our audience that are thinking, I need a plan. I have multiple demographics I'm trying to reach. I'm paralyzed by the fear to do this. What do I do?
I wouldn't mind taking it only because my mom is on the line. Hi, Mom. And she just side texted me. I hope you don't mind me outing you. I'm sorry in advance if you do, Mama. She was kind of poking at me because she's like, yo, your generation, she didn't say yo, but in my brain she did. Your generation isn't the only generation that wants to feel connected to something. So don't forget that. And I know I saw that Sarah had mentioned it in the question and answer box there, and also added the word bifurcated, which I love. So nice work on that. I Googled it just to make sure I knew. But I think that we sometimes can get into a bit of analysis paralysis, Jess. I think to your point, like sometimes just shedding it out and failing fast and failing forward, there's some power in that. I am very, very fortunate and grateful. United Way has done a really spectacular job. We have a very, very talented leadership team and staff team and board, incredible minds. I feel just privileged to be alongside, and that does lead to a bit more sophistication around strategy, I think, especially being a bit more of a legacy organization. That said, in my experience, I would say we have a really good balance of being pretty ballsy, and something that I've even just seen grow in appetite in the last several years. And I think for that, there needs to be a mix. We need to shed and I know, sometimes there's allergic reaction around the word millennial for this reason. I think that we've siloed ourselves to a fault. And at a certain point, it needs to be about how as human beings are we evolving and shifting and changing. And I think a universal impact as immense as this pandemic has been is, again, just further proof that, like, more often than not, we're really all in it together and we all just want what's best for our community. So I just wanted to mention that because it's obviously just getting a side text from my mom. I felt like it was appropriate, but Jason, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah. Hi, Mom. So I echo that wholeheartedly. In terms of the strategy thing, I think Jess's point is quite well taken. Depending on where you are in your sort of growth cycle as an organization, or depending on the issue that you're trying to deal with, almost dictates how you tackle it, right? And so, yeah, there are times, I think, for us, given that our membership is comprised of these really talented young professionals. The ability to be strategic is inherent in our advantage. We have this. One of the examples was we last year created a pro bono consulting firm, but the reason we did that was because just by the very nature of who our applicants were. And I know there was a question about how you can apply. You can visit yycshapers.org, and there's a sort of page dedicated to joining and then an interview process. But we just noticed that we had attracted a number of management consultants, and then we thought about in our community what issues we wanted to tackle and who would not have the ability to really sit down at any point in their organization's lifetime with a, you know, really talented KPMG management consultant or Deloitte consultant? And could we frame that expertise and the time that these people command on normal corporate projects out of market that they're usually being called to weigh in on? Can we dedicate that pro bono to our community? And so in terms of closing the loop on, you know, how are these trends changing in relation to philanthropy and giving? Maybe I've seen too many Kanye West interviews, but there was one line that he said, I think a couple of years ago, where he's like, time is increasingly becoming the only luxury. You know, money was seen for a period of time, the hard dollars, cutting that check was seen as the biggest influence. And I think, but for younger people, it's sort of shifted to time. You only have so much time in the day, and there's never been more abilities to be distracted by as many things as possible. How you choose to spend your time is a currency in and of itself. And so you're seeing these trends to passive giving, where I can be a Patreon subscriber and, a couple dollars out of my account goes out passively. But that's more or less similar to programs that have existed before. But increasingly you're seeing, can I go be a part of an experience and dedicate a period of my time or my expertise, or increasingly in our case, our voice to these particular issues, and what is that worth? And I think for our generation, that's becoming increasingly more valuable, and we're being more selective about how we spend that time. So being able to channel that into philanthropy is definitely an opportunity that I think needs to be more fully realized.
Thanks, Jason. I think that's really interesting when we look at, time as that currency, having a voice. We recently read a study. It came out of the Imagine Canada report. It's the Profit, Purpose, and Talent. And they specifically spoke to the fact that 28% of Canadians are willing to take a pay decrease in order to work for a company that's supporting their community. And what I found really shocking is that on an average, they're willing to forego 12% of their salary. So I'm curious, and I'll open this to the whole panel, is what comes to mind when you guys hear these stats, specifically not only from a dollar standpoint, but are we missing something when we consider, line of sight, having a voice and time in that measure? Maybe we can start with Ashley or Jason. Either.
I think one of the things, actually, it's funny that you say the 12%, because I'm reminded of an initiative that we looked at a couple of years ago as Gen Next, where we were trying to help, especially within our current donor segment at the time, more of the professional, up-and-comer, lots of professional services-based younger donors, and really teeing them up through formal or informal mentorship programs, where they could align with investors in the community and really start to understand best practice. Because in a lot of cases, we had folks who were donating on a smaller scale, but in their kind of life ambition or life goal was to really increase the level of giving that they have. Jess and Jason both mentioned a lot of family wealth planning will come down to a family making decisions about larger scale investments in the community, which I think, especially within Calgary, is just such a cool piece. And so within that, what had come to mind, and I wish I could credit the specific board member with this, we had someone that had come to sit with us. It'll come to me after this, I'm certain, but he mentioned that his guidepost was always 10%. So 10%, if he was making $30,000 a year or $30 million a year, it was 10% was the goal. And I really felt like that for sure resonated for me. And I know a lot of folks in the room were really excited about that idea of having a beacon number. I think Mom, I'm sorry, every time now I'm specifically saying generation, but in the case of the younger donor, we do definitely see that sentiment of goal crusher, having something where they're like, able to chase something specific or put something out there. And I think from the feedback that we were receiving is having a target amount when you aren't really sure where to start was a really helpful guidepost. So to me, that was what came up as you were expressing the number specifically. I do definitely think, I don't know that I would be, I think I would be surprised to see that being offered blindly. I think that there would likely be the caveats of, as long as I have visibility into, we see lots of obviously third-party systems that will help, especially in the corporate landscape. I know that we have this at Shaw, where you can do all of your donating through one singular platform. So that one-stop shop, ease of access, but still visibility to where it's going. So I can see some sort of allocation, almost like a piggy bank, but the piggy bank being able to be personally allocated. But it is super interesting. And I think it just becomes more and more, especially for those of us who I think of this environment are fortunate enough to still have jobs at this point, really thinking about how do I pay it forward? How do I give it back? And what does that look like in my local community?
That's great. Thank you. Anyone else want to comment? Otherwise, I'm gonna ask. I have a couple questions around some global shapers, but Jason.
No, I'll let you go right into it.
Oh, awesome. So I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I think, trying to understand the opportunity that exists with global shapers and the young leaders. And, you mentioned it, Jason, around unignorable challenges. And, when solving these big societal inequalities, collaboration is key, whether that is, through how we give our time or in fact, how a family chooses to give their money. But I'm sure you're familiar with the Bridging Leadership Framework. And I'm wondering if you can, share with our audience how Global Shapers is leveraging that framework for young leaders. And maybe we can spend some time talking about co-ownership and co-creation.
Yeah, certainly. It's a great question. Look, I think that what we want to do is to be able to attract very naturally these bridging leaders. These are folks that are already civically engaged. One of the expectations or caveats with our group is we're hoping to see that be a part of the ethos of your career and community journey before you come to Shapers. It's not the place to kind of start your work, it's the place to amplify your work amongst those who want to create change at scale. And given the fact that you mentioned the issues and the complexities around how big they are and inextricably tied to the Calgary context, that's just part of the framework for success for us. So we want those bridging leaders who have personal ownership for some of these issues. And actually in our interview process, we bring out those 4 pillars and say, what piece of this have you owned in the past? What work are you doing there? As we move towards that kind of co-ownership piece, that leadership framework is built into what we do at every level. So every event or engagement we do is one that's partnered. Like it's part of a multi-stakeholder process because, unlike other philanthropic or charitable organizations or not-for-profits, our primary modus operandi is not to raise funds, because depending on how the issues change, the opportunities change, we sort of set financial targets and time-based targets in terms of our volunteerism based on what the problem we feel demands. And so all of the initiatives that I think particularly in the last year we've done have all been partnered. So our Healthy Cities team is working right now with frontline responders, those that are sourcing personal protective equipment, those with accessibility needs. Our Future Cities team is working with major employers in the downtown core who are really reckoning with this future of work and who's going to be left behind and what else do we need to do? How prepared is our city for the future of work? And so that's the way that we frame out that collective response, is making sure that it's co-owned. And the best example I would say is this year through our Civic Life team, we just finished out a year last year where we had 2 major elections in this province and then federally. And one of the things that we were sort of, seen to be a good voice for was around civic engagement related to voting and making sure young people showed up to the ballot box. And we knew that, just telling people and young people within our age bracket to vote wasn't going to be good enough. So we found, and I guess this is where the strategic hat comes on, we found a way to leverage and partner with groups that also had some level of ownership in the game. And that for us was Apathy is Boring, Elections Canada, the Democracy Exchange out of Ryerson University. And we actually then found a group that was civically engaged, but not specifically within voting, which was 10 at 10 Calgary, which was a young hip hop collective that I think our other panelists will be familiar with. And we had this idea to say, you know what, every year you kind of do this back to school battle where all the post-secondaries bring out, dance crews, rap crews, artists to be able to battle one another. And usually, you crown a winner. There's no real cash involved. And we just saw this, perfect storm of connections to say, so how do they vote for the winner? Oh, we just, sort of put out a box and, you tabulate the votes. And I said, what if that box was an Elections Canada vote box? And what if this year we held it at a club that you had to show ID to? And all of a sudden we came to this space of co-creation where we were able to frame out, one of their biggest events for this back to school battle. But we were able to get up on stage at the end and not only cut a check to them because we were raising funds, but at the end, we're able to say to folks in the audience, as easy as you showed ID to get into this club, and as easy as you filled out that ballot, and put it into an Elections Canada box. Go do that exact same thing 1 week from now when we have our federal election. And I think that's where we were able to engage on a deeper level, create a model for collaboration that I think is going to be sustained in the future, and actually was able to leverage this kind of civic engagement issue we wanted to dive into at scale versus just using our voice or one of the tools in our toolbox. And that's where I think a good example of that bridging leadership framework in action for us has really taken off.
That's fantastic. I'm really curious, and there's actually a question in the audience. It's from Bruce, and I'm going to frame it a bit. But, you've talked about these young, people that you're bridging. Jess, you've also talked about these young donors, right? They're starting at 7. An array, of young people. But, we've talked about this line of sight, and as they get older, as they get married, their resources will change. And their lens for philanthropy will change. So what have you done and what are you doing that helps ensure that they don't drift away so that they can still remain engaged with the work that you're doing, whether that be through time or through dollars? Who would like to take that? Jess, do you want to start?
Sure, I can start. I saw that question pop up and it made me think, and I think Jason, hot dang, it's like, what a brilliant collaboration and showing people how easy it is. And so again, the same thing, I think it's for us has been strategic partners. And, one of the things that I'm most excited about that we're doing is we've found partners because literally the first 2 years was like the sweat off of our backs, like literally door to door. I literally would have conversations with strangers and I'd be like, oh, I should tell you about our foundation. And also if you'd like to donate money. And, that's how we did it, dollar by dollar. And now we've gotten strategic. And I think having these strategic partnerships in different areas and things. And ironically, truth be told, I hate DIY. I don't ever want to DIY. I will pay someone to hang the picture in my house to do the thing. I just don't have that time or bandwidth and it doesn't speak to me. But there's tons of people that love that. And so we've gotten strategic. So we're launching this partnership with a DIY studio. They had to pivot and shift their business. They were brick and mortar. Now they deliver these DIY kits and it's for the whole family. And so we have an area where literally you can buy a DIY kit, mom and kid, whatever it is, whole family can do it. No one can do it. The 5-year-old can do it. The 15-year-old can do it. And they've got these array of options. And so it's not just like coming to an event where it's 18 plus, we're saying, hey, here's a partnership that we have. Here's something you can do as a whole family. And all the proceeds are going to go towards Love for Lewiston. We have an amazing following. So organizations want to partner with us because they know that it can go in the newsletter and have reach on social. And we want to partner with people like them because they're doing the heavy lifting for us. And so I think it's not just about staying in one lane and doing only that thing. Again, we're still in 0 to $1 million. And so, call it the spaghetti strategy where you're just throwing spaghetti at the wall, hoping that it sticks and it's ready. We can still play fast, wild, and free, footloose and fancy. You go to United Way, Gen Next, these other organizations where you have to get strategic. I'm really proud of what we've done and where we've come. But we're still in the footloose, fancy, and free. That's my jam when we get to be more strategic and I have to have even more reins. I like to do stuff and people on my board are like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm like, well, let's just do it. It'll be awesome. We'll figure it out. And then it's like donor responsibility and, you really start to dial it back. So I think having collaborations, getting fun and thinking outside of the box, because we're not just appealing to someone that can come to an event. We're now appealing to, hey, you can do this at home with your family. Or, hey, here's this event, hitting fitness, hitting, music. And there's all these different elements where you start to get creative and you're not just hitting the same people up time and time again. You're broadening the audience, which I think it makes it look more attractive. And for my daughter, we are in that, I think, very similar thing where it's my husband and me, we're trying to make it work, make all the dreams happen. One day to take the family to Disney. That's what we dream of doing. We're hustling, we're working our buns off. But when we do our give back and when we give to charity organizations, like my daughter, we live in the Northwest. We drive by the hospital, or we used to when we were driving every single day. And she knows that that is one of the most important places that we give back to. She knows that when we raise money or when we show up in an event or when she's getting involved in something. And so she's known this since she was literally less than 2 years old, and it's in her DNA. And I think for us as a family, speaking from a giving standpoint, we've involved the family and it's been really awesome to see. And there's 100 kids doing amazing work, and the kids are making the decision on where the money goes. And so I think you can start anywhere. You can appeal to anybody. You just have to get strategic in how you do it.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Jess. We have a question we'd love to ask. We're going to run out of time. So I'm hoping our panelists can stay with us. But the question specifically is around, if someone was to show up from a charitable organization and says to you, what's the blueprint for success in engaging young leaders? And we're going to be looking for top 3 things. So for those of us that are in the audience today, go find us on YouTube and you'll be able to hear exactly what those top 3 things are from each of our panelists today. Any final parting words before you move to that last question, offsite, from Jason or Ashley yourself?
Yeah, I'll just say 2 couple of things. One is, with all the Speedo talk, I feel overdressed. But
we can mail you a
volunteer.
Yeah, I hear a volunteer. Get crunch in there, Jason.
Careful what I wish for. But the second thing is, I think, this has been a really welcome conversation. And I think that the central thing, and not just tipping my hand to the answers offline that we give in the recording, but I think the issues, and I think this is central for the United Way as well too. They've taken a focus, and so have us, on these issues that we want to deal with. And I think increasingly, going back 50 years to now, what has been undeniably true is that people are attracted to issues. And I think if you continue to meet people where you're at, your tactics may change. The mediums may change. I think in The Philanthropist a few months ago, 2 Calgary academics, sort of framed out this 4th social purpose revolution, rather than the 4th industrial revolution that the WEF has pitched around, in an AI enhanced world, it's all going to come down to the vehicle that delivers social good. And I think if we, highlight the issues that matter to us most, people will come along with you, and the strength will just be based on your tactics. And so the last thing I'll announce, which is kind of cool today, is Global Shapers Calgary figures out, or has at least established for us through COVID, that food security is one of those issues. And so today, we're announcing a $1,000 donation to the Leftovers Foundation in response to COVID-19 to deal with that. And I think that ability to hone in on an issue, figure out the right timing to be able to execute on that, and being part of this conversation has been a really welcome opportunity for us. But those are some parting words I think would be useful for the attendees.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, we are at time. So James and I would like to thank all of you, Jess, Jason, and Ashley, for being with us today. And for our audience members for hanging on for a couple extra minutes. If you'd like to continue engaging with us on this topic and many others, please join Open City. It's our open innovation platform. You can also follow the Social Impact Lab on all social channels. And next week, our next Innovation Table discussion is around adaptation and adoption, May 20th. Thank you for joining us today, everyone. Be safe and stay healthy. This is a great conversation so far. Thank you to each of you. And, we really appreciate all the questions that have come from our audience, but we also want to leave something with them. And so we're hoping each of you can take a moment to answer this question. So we'll start with you, Jess. If a charitable organization were to come to you and ask you for your blueprint for success in engaging young leaders, what top three things would you share with them?
Hot dang, you put me on the spot here. I want to come up with something super special, but I really think that we overthink things. I think as an organization, we can overthink, overplan, and in that, then we lose out on the magic. And time again, we've seen, young leaders show up for our organization because we've had a welcoming platform where anybody's welcome. It doesn't matter shape, size, tall, age, whatever. It's like you're welcome here to sit with us, to serve with us, and to show up. We tell a story, and so people truly understand where the dollars and cents go. And when you have that type of connection and you understand where the funds are going, and it's not so lost in translation or lost in marketing. And then I think it's just about continuing to show up, do the hard work, and stay consistent, that, you build on that momentum. It's like when you're learning to run a marathon, like you don't just go out and go do it. Like, it's like you put in the miles and you put in the reps. And so I would say that to any organization is you can't just expect magic to happen overnight. And if you miss the mark, you know, if running mile 1 and mile 2 is hard, well, if you quit and give up, then obviously you're not going to have that momentum. But if you keep showing up and keep saying, hey, here's what we're doing and here's where we're going and we're going to keep training and we're going to keep welcoming people, that's where that momentum has built. And I believe that's what it's done for us as an organization, is that we've just continued to show up. We've just continued with forward momentum. And now, perfect time, you know, we've had to pivot and shift and change things. And we have an option to either like give up and just say, okay, things got hard. Our plans didn't go the way we thought they would. And we're just going to like throw in the towel. Or we can say, how can we use this as a blessing? How can we make this work for us? And so again, we're going to continue to show up. And I just say, keep showing up, keep the momentum going, and keep those welcoming arms open and saying like, you don't have to be. I tried to volunteer with an organization and literally it was so complicated that I just walked away. I was like, I ain't got time for that. I'm like, I'm here now. I'm breathing. I am like, my feet are planted. I'm here to serve. And it was like, please fill out this 49-page application. We need a driver's license, 19. And I'm like, what? And that generation, young leaders, they don't have that kind of time. And Jason touched on this. Time is freaking currency. And that is for my cleaners. That is my cleaners hashtag on Instagram. Time is currency. And so it's like, be smart about how you're showing up. And then that momentum will just keep you going.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Jess, for sharing that. Ashley, over to you.
Thank you. And it's Jess, I think you said so many of those pieces super, super well. I'll keep it short and frank because I'm definitely in agreement. I think number one, keep it frank and real.
Mm-hmm.
Fresh and frank. Don't like buzzwordy, fluffy baloney is not going to carry you very far.
Mm-hmm.
I think number two is keep it connected 100%. I think that we really rallied on this throughout the last hour, but making sure that there's a line of sight, a level of involvement, and something that's kind of fun. I mean, both Jess and Jason shared options around that. And I think the third one is, and Jesse started to get to this there as well, is make sure that there's something available real time. This is something that for sure within Gen Next in the United Way segment, we've really, really seen both as a barrier and a blessing in certain situations. We are, and I will say this is more of a generational specific component, but we are a get it right now, Amazon Prime, I'm reading the article, not the full book society. We've really, really started to shift and evolve there. And I think those of us that are straddling the line between Gen X and millennials and all the next Gen Z folks, we need to keep it real time. We need to keep it available because people want it and they want it now. So when they're in the moment, have something available to them. I think that that's a really critical component as well.
Jason, over to you. I could make comments on all of these because I've taken some great notes and I'm really excited to start sharing what you're sharing with us on those top three. But Jason, over to you.
Yeah, just to echo that, those are all, I think, great blueprints for success. You know, the three things that I think about, you know, the first one, you know, really speaks to issues. And I think if you're an organization that wants to focus on giving, or say you're a company that wants to be able to better match purpose or the purpose of your employees with, you know, forwarding your bottom line, narrowing in on the issues that people are passionate about, the causes that they're passionate about, and seeing their journey evolve, I think is incredibly important. You know, for Jess and the Love for Lewiston context, it's, you know, I think about the ways of finding, even if your primary goal is raising funds for SMA throughout the entirety of your organization, it's about finding interesting and new and fun ways to be able to bring the attention to SMA, or to reframe people's focus on SMA and the impacts that it has for that child or that family. And so always continuously going back to those issues and how you present them, I think is sort of, you know, blueprint number one. I think the second is being willing to challenge your assumptions and adapt. COVID-19, the worst thing that can be done is to be able to waste a crisis. What I hope this has exposed for a number of people, and this is folks within the philanthropic and charitable sector and outside, is to be able to challenge your assumptions that you can be steady state and just accept that, you know what, there will always be an audience for us. And I think what you're seeing, you know, United Way and the Social Impact Lab, like people are taking, you know, very concerted steps of thinking about how do we foster innovation? How do we check our assumptions and go to a new place where maybe the process of which we, through which we raise funds, or get new donors is completely markedly different from what we did before. And if it's not, if it is tried and true, let's challenge our assumption that we need to change. But I think having that sort of lens for adaptation and innovation and being ready to toss aside what doesn't work for something that does in that moment, I think is incredibly important. The last thing that I'll say is number 3 is, no matter what audience you're either passively or directly curating, that may be the beneficiary of funds that you're fundraising for, or your volunteer cohort or stakeholders that you want to bring on side. I really think that the strength of a not-for-profit or a charity in this day and age is about bridging the divides across potential audiences. There's a scene in Mad Men where I think Don Draper is talking to some really big company, I think it's Dow Chemical, and they have a big portion of the market. It's not everything, but it's a big portion. And they're listening to, what can you do for us? We own such and such percentage of the market. I think it's 70 something. Don't quote me. But Don's sort of retort back is, you're good with 70%. Like, you're good with that. I won't stop until you get 100%. There is nothing, hearing these stories right now, there is nothing to me that sort of demonstrates that Jess should be focusing on only one sort of specific target market. She should be going after everybody. Global Shapers, even though the membership is young, should be touching everybody. And as long as you're not spreading yourself too thin, and you have a message that can translate and reach people where they're at, I think that's the most important part, specifically where a lot of noise is being made about what millennials will do in their giving. I think millennials should do what they need to do to drive outcomes for the causes that they care about. And inevitably and inherent in that is the means to bridge divides and have a message and a cause that scales. So those are my issues: adaptation and bridging those divides are the 3 blueprint sort of steps that I would advocate for.
Great. Thanks, Jason, for that. Jess and Ashley, thanks as well. All 3 great blueprints for people to think about what they can start right away, jumping in, not being afraid, not paralyzed by fear.